Ladies, this is week 14, I think. We're looking at Bathsheba, and I know it's a very familiar account. Let me give you a very, very quick prophecy update. Just this past week, Russia, Iran, Turkey, maybe. The key players in Ezekiel 38 met with up in Kazakhstan, which is another player in the Caucasus region of the area that's named in Ezekiel 38. They had a meeting and they voted officially to denounce the United States' approval of Israel being the ones who have the right to the Golan Heights, which is northern Israel, which is on the Syrian border. Also, the Iranian leader made an announcement basically saying, we'll negotiate with the United States after they apologize for whatever, I don't know what, I guess for being United States, and pay us back, pay a penalty or something like that, and which is basically a joke. Okay, the U.S. is never going to admit that they've done something wrong to Iran or whatever, because I guess they're really upset with us labeling the Iranian military as a terrorist organization, because the U.S. just, again, in this last week, Secretary Pompeo announced that the Revolutionary Guard is a terrorist organization, so anyone who does business with Iran will no longer be allowed to do business with the United States. So these European nations that were wanting to do business with Iran, we're talking Germany, France, and other big names, if they do business with Iran, United States won't do business with them. That's a big deal. Okay? So Iran's kind of got their knickers in a wad, and their economy is so bad. Syria right now is so bad that I think it's 80% of their people are below poverty. There's no gas. Nobody will sell Syria, the nation, any gasoline because they can't pay their bills. Okay? So they're standing in gas lines just hoping to get gas to be able to get around, and if there is any work to do to get there. Syria's in shambles right now. This is all leading up to May 15th, when President Trump is wanting to announce his new peace agreement plan, which Hezbollah is already, and Hamas has already said, we're not going to do this, which is true. The Palestinians never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. Okay? They don't want peace, they want the annihilation of Israel. Okay? And so the president's plan most likely will not include a two-state solution like has always been put out there forever, because they realize it doesn't work. And it's going to be something that probably the Palestinians really don't like. But other members of the Middle East will say, we're tired of the strife, we're tired of paying the Palestinians. None of these other Middle Eastern nations are now wanting to fund Hezbollah and Hamas, the leadership of the PLO, because they know the money's not going to the people, it's going to make other, these alleged leaders rich. So it's boiling up. Let me just put it that way. It's boiling up, which May 15th is the day of remembrance. It's the day of Israel's independence, okay, 1948, when they became a nation. And it's, by the Islamic nations, it's considered the day of disaster. Okay, so it's very interesting that who's this chick from Minnesota or Michigan, this Iranian senator or representative or whatever?
She's from New York. AOC's from New York.
Not AOC. It's the one that wears the hijab. The hijab.
Yeah.
She said, well, everybody knows Jesus is a Palestinian, which is crazy because that's not true. Palestine did not become a term used until like the 1100s by a Roman emperor who was mocking basically Israel and calling Palestine is a take on the word Philistine, and he was mocking the Jews basically. Oh, we're just going to give this territory's name Palestine. There is no such thing as a Palestinian. They never had a nation. So I think what Trump may offer them is citizenry in whatever country they have gone to is basically going to give them citizenry. So whatever Palestinians like, if they want to leave where they're at, they can become a citizen of Germany, France, wherever they've gone. Or maybe Israel will just take over everything. I don't know. But it's going to be interesting to watch because the Palestinians won't agree to it. Those anti-Israel nations in the Middle East won't agree to it. There will be nations like Sheba and Dinan, which is Saudi Arabia, will agree to it. So it's going to be very interesting to watch. So keep your eyes open. It also means the Lord's coming soon, I hope.
That woman is Rashida Tlaib or something. She was a former Michigan state lawmaker.
Okay.
Now she's the first minority woman to serve as a U.S. rep from Minnesota.
Yeah.
She's got dark hair.
Yeah, she wears a hijab. There's two of them, Iban something, and but anyway.
But yeah, I knew there's that lady up there. There's the
Yeah.
one from New York City who has the Green Deal and all this other stuff.
Yeah, AOC. She's not a Muslim though. She's just challenged
Yeah.
mentally. Anyway, AOC, Cortez lady.
Yeah,
She's a joke. Anyway, chapter 2 Samuel chapter 11. Let's go there. 2 Samuel chapter 11. Got a lot to cover in a short amount of time. So we all know the account. So I'm not going to give a whole lot of backstory to it. We're at a point in life where David is older. He had an experience in battle where he was about to be slain in a previous fight, and they rescued him, and they basically said, you're not going to go to battle with the army anymore. Apparently he takes that seriously because it's springtime, and springtime is when you go to war. I understand that in the middle of winter it's not a good time to be in a fight. So chariots get stuck, and hopefully this is after the spring thaw too, because I imagine chariots getting stuck in the mud too. But anyway, he sends the army out. The army's out fighting. He's living the life of luxury of a king, okay? And he is probably taking a nap, gets up from his nap, starts walking around the rooftop. And his rooftop is going to be, when you go into Jerusalem, you'll see that where his palace was higher than most of anything in the kingdom. So he could look down and see things the average person couldn't. Now I want you also to remember that in Jewish law, in the Mosaic law, when a woman had her period, she was responsible to go through purification. She had to bathe in the mikveh. Now, they didn't have indoor plumbing. That's pretty obvious to us. So she couldn't go into the privacy of her own bath. It's my understanding, this could be wrong, that a lot of their mikvahs would be, or their bathing areas would be on their rooftop, okay? And hoping that nobody else you're up on your roof, nobody should be able to see you, right? Okay? I want you to understand that Bathsheba wasn't doing anything out of the ordinary. She was following protocol of the law. She had had her period, she had to wait a certain number of days, and she had to go through purification, meaning bathing. Okay? She was not looking for an opportunity to expose herself to David. Okay? She was not trying to seduce. She was just going through her normal procedure post-menstruation. Okay? But he happens to catch sight of her. And what do we learn about her in verse 2? This woman was very beautiful. She was hot. Okay? Any guy looking at her would be like, oh my word. She is the picture of beauty. Now he sees her, and he sends messengers. He wants to find out about this woman. Now mind you, this is a man who has he's multiplied wives. One of the things the Lord said, don't do that. He's got wives and concubines. Okay? And I'm not here to get into polygamy and all that. But the Lord, for some reason, tolerated it. But it was a sign of wealth in that culture. The more women you could support meant you were a big deal, and you could get your jollies on whichever one you wanted. And that's, to me, is deplorable, but that's the way it was. So he finds out that her name is Bathsheba. She's the daughter of Eliam, which is very likely the same Eliam who is one of his mighty men and one of his main officials. Okay? So her father is someone who has been a faithful servant of David's. And she's the wife of Uriah. And when you look at the list of David's quote-unquote mighty men, Uriah is on this list. He's been a faithful warrior. And throughout this whole story, we see him continuing to be upright and faithful, not only to David, but to his fellow soldiers. Okay? So David sends messengers to her, and took her. Okay? She doesn't go with them, she's taken. One of the things that we need to understand, if the king summons you, you go. Let me go back to a different account, a different situation. Think of the story of Esther. Okay? Who, early on in the account of Esther, the king is having a party. Okay? He's drunker than a skunk. But he wants to show off the beauty of whom? Who does he want to show everyone? Look how beautiful my wife is. Who is it? Queen Vashti. She's summoned to the king. What doesn't she do?
Go.
She doesn't go. What does it cost her?
Her life.
Well, some people say it was her life. That's not stipulated in the account, but she's no longer queen. Okay? And the search for a new queen happens. Did Bathsheba have a choice when she's summoned by the king? No, not at all. The repercussions of not going would have been potentially very severe. She doesn't know why she's going. She just knows she's being summoned. She's been taken. Okay? She didn't get asked to come. She got told, you're coming with us, the king wants to see you. Okay? Women in that culture were property. You owned them. You bought them. Remember when we've talked about this, how, if you're going to take a wife, you have to pay a price. You pay the bride price. Remember when Saul offers David his oldest, he's like, who am I? I can't afford this. And then Michal, or Michelle, or however you pronounce her name, I can't afford this. And Saul says, all I want is 100 foreskins of Philistines. Okay, brings him 200 instead. Okay? There's a bride price that's paid. So women are property. They don't have rights. They didn't have the women's rights. They don't have the culture. We filter everything through our culture and say women have a right to say who they marry or don't marry. No, they didn't. No, they didn't. Okay? So David takes her. She came into him, and he tells her exactly what he wants, and she capitulates. Again, there's some degree of, we don't know how much she pushed back and tried to reason with him, but he knows full well what he's doing. This is a married woman. And all he's thinking is, this will satisfy. He's hooked on lust. This will satisfy. This will be great. He just wanted a one-night stand. He didn't really want to take her as his wife. He just wanted to enjoy the lust of the flesh for the moment. But the thing is that I didn't get a chance to look this up, but it's in my brain. It says that there's a certain number of days after a woman's cycle. I think it's like 7 days after your cycle that you go and you do your purification. And as I do it in my head, she's ready to ovulate.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So they have relations, and she sends a message later saying, David, we got a problem here. King David, I'm pregnant. What are you going to do about it? And so we know, and I'm not going to get into the gory details, but he instigates a cover-up and has Uriah murdered. In essence, we know it's murder, but he was killed in battle, so to speak. And then we go to verse 24, I think. Yep. Down to verse 24, we see him die in battle. In 25, David says, don't worry about it. And then 26, Bathsheba heard that her husband was dead. She mourns for her husband. Okay? She mourns for him. She knows that nothing that is going on for her right now has really been of her choosing. Okay? I've heard a lot of different people say, you know, she seduced him, she's responsible, she wasn't modest. She was doing normal things that she would have done like she did all the time, and he wasn't where he was supposed to be. He sees her and takes advantage of it. She has no say in any of this. And when the time of mourning was over, David brings her to his house. He adds her to his collection. She becomes his wife. She bears a son. But the thing that David had done was evil in the Lord's sight. And then we have the account of Nathan coming to him and exposing the sin. And, of course, David repenting. But here's the next thing that happens to her. You know, she hasn't, to our knowledge, she has not had any children with Uriah. And as a woman in that culture, your value was totally connected to having kids. So here she was thinking, okay, there's some saving grace to all of this. I'm pregnant, I'm going to have a kid. And he's going to have royal blood. Okay, this is I can deal with this, I can adjust, I can try to bring something positive out of this. What happens to the boy? Now her firstborn son dies, and whose fault is it? David's. Okay? Now we know that he intercedes and tries to get the Lord to have mercy on the boy, but he dies. So not only is she taken advantage of by David, and she has no choice in that, her husband dies, the godly man that's been in her life, he dies, and now the son dies. All of this as a result of someone else's sin, someone else's choices that she had no right to really protest in her culture. So it's not been so good for her, has it? So we learn 2 Samuel 12. Go over to 2 Samuel 12. She's grieving. She is absolutely grieving. And then verse 24, David's grieving too. He didn't want to lose his son. He didn't want to hurt her. I think he's got a tremendous amount of guilt going through his system. Not only has he done something wrong before the Lord, not only has he hurt Bathsheba, but now he's seeing the ripple effect of his sin. And how many lives are deeply wounded by it. He realizes he's deeply wounded her. I can't imagine how many times he has gone to her and said, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. But he comforts her, and he lays with her again, and she conceives. And she gives birth to a son, and this is where we meet Solomon. Or another name that the Lord had given him was Jedediah, which means beloved of the Lord. And so we see her go from having everything ripped away from her to God in His grace and His mercy giving her Solomon, having the privilege of raising him. They're very close. And being told by David, this son, your son, is going to succeed me. He's the one that's going to be king. So what a transformation in circumstances happens for her. Now she winds up actually saving her son's life. If you go over to 1 Kings chapter 1, David is really old. He's old, and you get older, you get colder, okay? He's so cold that he has to have a gal sleep with him to keep him warm, although he doesn't have relations with her, and she's a key person. Her name is Abishag. She's a Shunammite. She was very beautiful, but she nursed him in his old age. And even though David has stipulated verbally, hey, Solomon's going to succeed me, the next oldest, after Absalom's death, next oldest is named Adonijah. And he presumes the kingdom is going to be mine. And Joab, remember Joab, he is the commander of the army, backs him, and so does another guy, Benaniah. And so he starts to act very kingly. He acts like he's going to be a co-regent with his dad, because dad's old and feeble, and I'm going to be co-regent here. And he sets up all these chariots around, but he acts very kingly. Wherever he's got his own escort, like the Secret Service escorts the president around. He's got his own escort, very regal fashion. And they go to have this festival, this celebration. They're going to crown him king. But he doesn't invite Solomon, and he doesn't invite Nathan. Now, Nathan was the prophet that outed David's sin and very close to David. So those two people weren't invited. So that means that once he's crowned king, he has a plan. I'm going to kill Solomon, and I'm going to kill his mother, and I'm going to kill Nathan. That's what was done in kingdoms, that you kill any rival, except his other brothers he would let live. At least he gave the indication of that. So in chapter 1, Nathan goes to Bathsheba and says, we got to do something here, otherwise you and your son will be dead. So Bathsheba becomes that intercessor, in a sense, that she has to go before King David. And again, you can't just go into the king. Now, it's not quite as severe as what we saw in Esther, but she goes to David and basically says, haven't you, let me get to the right chapter here. She bows before the king, verse 16, and he says, what do you wish? My Lord, verse 17, you swore to your maidservant by the Lord your God, saying, surely your son Solomon shall be king after me, and he shall sit on my throne. Now behold, Adonijah is king, and now, my lord the king, you do not know it. Because he had heard Adonijah's actions and did nothing. He was a disengaged parent, and he was a horrible parent. And he did nothing to stop Adonijah. So she goes on and relates what's going on. Nathan comes in, backs up her story, and David takes action. And he answers and brings her back in, verse 28, call her back in. As the Lord lives, I vowed to you, your son will be king. And then she bows down and says, may my Lord King David live forever. So he calls Zadok the priest, Nathan the prophet. Actually, Benaniah was a good guy. I'm sorry, I got his name wrong. And he gives the order in verse 33, take your servants, your Lord, have my son Solomon ride on my own mule, bring him down to Gihon, and declare him king. He sets him up on his own on his own throne, appoints him ruler over Israel. Again, because time is fleeting, he officiates the coronation of his son, King Solomon. Adonijah takes off. He goes to the temple, grabs hold of the horns of the altar because he knows he's going to be killed. Solomon, being a man of peace, says, look, you don't give me any trouble, I won't give you any trouble. Allows him to go to his home. Okay? He's giving him grace. He wouldn't have gotten the same grace from Adonijah. Now, Adonijah later goes to Bathsheba, and she unwittingly agrees. He asks her to go to Solomon, ask for the woman who was used to keep David warm, his concubine, Abishag, as a wife. Please allow me to take her as a wife. And what Bathsheba didn't understand was that was basically asking for the kingdom. Him taking one of David's concubines as a wife would have put him in a position to say, I'm king. See, I've got her. This was my father's. I've got her. She's mine. I should be king. He was setting himself up to challenge for the throne.
Why was she considered a concubine if she didn't never sleep with David?
Because he had taken her as part of the harem. Even though she was never slept with him, she was his property. Okay. Abishag didn't have a choice to become his nurse. Again, I'm glad I didn't live in that culture. Mm-hmm. Okay? But she was considered David's property. And because Adonijah asked for David's property, he was basically saying, I have the right to inherit. Solomon inherited the harem. Okay? Give me one. I have the right. I'm the oldest son. I have the right. Give me this.
Why did David get to choose which son could?
Actually, because the Lord showed him, the Lord had shown David, this is who I want to succeed you. Even back when he was named, this is who is going to rule through you.
So it was God's.
It was really the Lord's choice, and David was acting on it. But he wasn't, in his older age, and he really was a neglectful father. He was not a good dad. Let's just leave it at that. But failed to fulfill that role of parent. So anyway, Solomon says to his mom, why don't you just give him the kingdom? And he realizes that his brother's not going to be content until he's king. And that's when Adonijah winds up getting executed, and the order was given. So she's a very interesting lady to follow and to see the ups and downs. You know, I don't believe personally that she was a seductress, okay? I believe everything happened to her as a result of the culture she lived in and David's choices, and how everything, the ripple effect of losing her firstborn son as a result of his sin, she still had to face this guy, deal with him, comfort him. He comforted her. She has Solomon. That is what brings her back to joy, her son. And, you know, God in his grace restored her through that. So that's okay. I get it. So she may have been cursed by beauty. Beauty's not necessarily always a wonderful thing to have in this world because of the lusts of the flesh. But God restored her in spite of what other people's sins impact in her life. She winds up saving Solomon's life, but then also not so smart. And she wasn't the shrewdest, politically shrewd person, but that's okay. I'm not either, you know. Women, we tend to be naive. Yeah, thank you, Eve. It's even in the how you pronounce it, naive. So anyway, our God in his goodness restored her by grace and gave life, brought good out of the effects of evil in her, of other people's choices. So I don't know if that makes sense, that God in his grace did that. So let's pray and we'll let you go. Father, I thank you that you did indeed bring good into Bathsheba's life after other people's sin brought so much heartache and sorrow. And I thank you for her testimony of perseverance and how you used her. And I thank you that she's in Messiah's bloodline. And Lord, you're not afraid of that. You didn't shun away from that. And so we thank you for your demonstration of grace in her life and the same grace that you bestow in ours. And we just give you glory and thanks for that. In Jesus' name, amen.